But first, I have to say, Peter Dutton, good news. When did you last hear a Liberal leader get stuck into a culture war and fight, and I mean fight, for free speech and freedom from the anti-Christian bullies who claim to be all for tolerance? Today, the federal opposition leader did just that and defended Andrew Thorburn, the former NAB bank boss, who was yesterday forced to quit as head of the Essendon AFL Football Club for being a Christian, the chairman of an Anglican church.
Now, in our country, we have the freedom of speech and we have the freedom of religious association as fundamental elements of our society, of our democracy. And I think there has been a very egregious attack on an individual because of his religious beliefs.
That, after the Morrison years, after the Turnbull years, is like water in a desert. A Liberal fighting like that for freedom and for fairness. And what a contrast to Labor Premier Daniel Andrews, who today showed how vindictive he is, how intolerant and unfair. Andrews today doubled down on his vilification of Thorburn and Thorburn's Lighton Hill Church, calling them homophobes and bigots, people for whom there was no room in his state.
People should be treated fairly and safely, and who they are ought to be enough. That's always been my view. There's no place for homophobia and bigotry.
Let me show you something that shows even more clearly than I showed you last night, that it is Andrews himself who treats people unfairly and with bigotry. 7 years ago, when Thorburn was head of the NAB, the Herald Sun reported the AFL was set to launch a gay pride game to actually fight homophobia during the NAB Challenge, a pre-season competition sponsored by Thorburn's bank. And whose idea was this competition? In fact, it was the man that Premier Andrews is today demonising as a homophobe. As the Herald Sun reported, NAB Chief Executive Andrew Thorburn said the bank approached the AFL about using the NAB Challenge as a platform to raise awareness of the LGBTI community. Thorburn told the paper, "At NAB, we believe in diversity. We want everyone to be themselves at work, home and at the footy." This then is the man that Essendon yesterday got rid of, saying his church's values were not the values of their club. This is the man that Premier Andrews has been abusing for 2 days straight and smearing as a homophobe. I tell you, this is disgusting. It's truly shameful for the club, the state and the country. Because we're now hearing people, backed by the Premier, saying to Christians, no job for you. As I said last night, Thorburn had just been appointed the new CEO at Essendon when journalists said, hang on, this man's a Christian. He's chairman of an Anglican church that still has on its website sermons from a pastor 9 years ago saying that he mourned the legal murder of babies through abortion. And that's, in fact, a sentiment millions of Catholics would also agree with. Another sermon said the Bible is against sex outside marriage and therefore against gay sex. Not against gays, mark well, just against gay sex. Now, you may not agree with that position, but so what? Thorburn wasn't chairman of the church at the time. He hadn't seen the sermons, and Essendon admitted he hadn't said these things himself. And besides, he wasn't hired to be Essendon's pastor to preach the faith. He's just trying to get a football club profitable and putting a good team out in the paddock. Yet the club's board said, you've got to choose between your church and your job, which to me sounds against the law, dead against the law. That is religious discrimination. It's pure anti-Christian bigotry. In fact, the Essendon chairman made that absolutely clear, the fool saying that it became really clear that Andrew couldn't be chairman of that church with those views and CEO of the Essendon Football Club. Thorburn refused to choose one against the other, so he had to go. So mainstream Christian views disqualify you from running a football club. I mean, seriously, what bigotry is this? Now, there's something so sick in Victoria particularly that the Premier just dug deeper into his mud bucket today and made an argument that shows he's really a totalitarian at heart, a dictatorial figure who has corrupted the culture of his state. No, he said, it wasn't me who got rid of Thornton. And then came another smear. Apparently Thornton, believe it or not, is now killing kids. I mean, listen to this argument. It stinks to high heaven.
But let's be very clear about this. Let's be very clear about this. The rate of suicide among same-sex attracted young people, LGBTIQ plus young people, is 2, 3, 4, 5 times the rate of suicide in the broader Victorian community. So people can get all upset about the fact that someone resigned. I'm much more focused on the fact that people are harming themselves and sometimes taking their own lives because of bigotry and prejudice. Let's not lose perspective about this. This is not about who runs a footy club. This is about issues that are much, much bigger than that.
Let me note 3 things about Andrew's argument there, things that no Premier should ever say about a fellow citizen like that. Vile things. First, the Premier is judging Thornton not as an individual, in this case the sponsor of a gay pride event, but by some caricature of a Christian. That is bigotry. He's also smearing Thornton and his church as child killers, by implication, with no evidence of any responsibility on their part, no weighing of any good that they do. That is character assassination. And is excusing an injustice to an individual, in this case Thornton, by saying, well, there's got bigger issues to worry about. And that is simply unjust. That is straight out of the Marxist and Leninist playbook that says, well, you can't make a revolution without breaking eggs. The individual has got to be sacrificed to the revolution. The fatherland, if there's an injustice, so what? There's a bigger cause. And that is the totalitarian's argument. The Christian message, of course, is very different. It says, what you do to the least of people matters. No one individual is just fuel for the fire of some bully's revolution. If that sounds like too much theory for you, too much philosophizing, let me tell you straight. Daniel Andrews is a thug who will sacrifice anyone, maybe next time you, to get his way. I mean, just look how he crushed people with his insane lockdowns, bans on playgrounds, how his police then fired rubber bullets at people who protested for their rights. And look what his police and his public prosecutor and his judges did to George Pell, a Catholic falsely jailed as a pedophile until the High Court freed him. The mask is now off, and it reveals something monstrous.